In association with Visit Maldives, the sunny side of life. This one's a very special one. It may be the last one, but certainly not the least, because it is a night dive, which initially we were told it's going to be quite tough to capture because lighting, etc. But we thought, let's give it a try.
Night dive.
Never a thing, and suddenly I'm told, we should capture night dives. I'm like, oh, okay. Is that going to be a little tough with lighting? What do you reckon in terms of the production element of it?
Well,
visibility-wise,
always challenging. Not so much. I mean, I wouldn't say visibility, but yeah, of course, your lack of light and your lack of field of view. So
beautiful sightings during the day, but in the night, is it a different kind of sighting that you would see in terms of the nocturnal creatures? What do you reckon?
Two things. So one would be there are animals you don't normally see active during the daytime. Things like lobsters that you find hiding under. You might spot them, but they're usually tucked into holes and crevices. You might see them walking around on the reef feeding. Same with moray eels. I think earlier we saw several times moray eels inside those holes. You might see them free swimming. There are certain invertebrates, mostly a lot of invertebrates like crabs and shrimps coming out to feed.
Okay, do you reckon nocturnal wildlife is a little bit more scared or skeptical of divers since they don't see them as often? Because I mean we saw in the previous live streams the sharks, the turtles, they were more accustomed to divers. They came welcoming the divers.
Not so much. I mean, yeah, nocturnal animals tend to be a bit more skittish, but usually what you find is as you shine a light on them, you do have a momentary pause of the animal because they kind of pause in the light for a moment. Maybe they're confused.
Out of shock.
Yeah, so it's really fun to kind of see that. Then after a while, they go about their normal business.
Fantastic. This is Divestream with Cinnamon, the very final one, episode 6 of 6. In association with Visit Maldives, the sunny side of life. We are coming to you, not exactly live, an hour or so of delay because the footage is captured and transferred into the studios of the house reef of Ellaidhoo Maldives by Cinnamon. And in the very first episode, as the manager of the dive center explained, this is perhaps one of the only dive sites in entire Maldives where it works 24 hours because it is just by your rooms at this absolutely stunning resort. And if you have any questions, do drop them in please on our Facebook Live and YouTube Live. We'll be happy to take them on. As always, Nishan Pereira, marine biologist, co-founder of Blue Resources, in studio to answer all your questions. And in the waters, of course, Aakash Malhotra. He is an absolutely fantastic content creator. He's done so much of fantastic work for us. And yeah, his first night dive capture, our first night dive, so things are quite exciting. Really quick coming in from Phil Howells. He's like, I'm ready. Drinks, snacks at hand, ready to go. Well, I'm not going to lie, I wish I had some of those with me right now to keep us assisted during this night stream.
Yeah, always fun to finish a night dive and maybe catch up over a beer or have dinner afterwards. Usually, you get a little bit more chilly at night, not because the water is colder, but when you exit the water, there's no sun shining down on you, so you always feel a little bit colder after a night dive. Always nice to have a nice hot meal soon afterwards.
Yeah, there's another comment coming in from Peter De Beer. He says, Ellaidhoo night dives are really good. Plenty to see, especially near the jetty area with some lights. Well, we are hoping for sightings of that nature.
Yeah, so you also see that some of the animals you see during the daytime are still hanging around on the reef. What's interesting is there's a butterfly fish moving around there. So some of the butterfly fish actually have a very interesting behavior. A lot of these animals have do different things at night, and they change their color patterns at night. So they have their daytime, pattern on their body, but they have a different pattern. So fish are able to kind of change colors, put on bars and spots and different patterns on their bodies. So we normally don't know this. We think of chameleons changing colors. Well, fish do it all the time, and some fish do it basically from daytime to night. So that aids in their kind of camouflage at night as well. So at night you'll usually see things like squirrel fish, cardinal fish. Usually you don't see them so much during the daytime. They're hiding under ledges. They come out to kind of feed. and some of the fish you see in schools in the daytime. I think we mentioned this a couple of times in the other events on the other days, like the snappers, goldfish. You find them in schools, but in the night you don't see those big schools. If you look now, you're not seeing the big schools because they disperse over the reef, and individual fish will spread out over large areas across the reef, in shallow, in deep water, looking for food. So you won't find the same. So that's something you notice on night dive. You don't see the same schools of fish. So that's a surgeon fish that's active in the daytime, so he's moving around. There's a regal angelfish. This is one of the prettiest angelfish in the Maldives. Now these are daytime animals, so they're just kind of hanging around. There's some squirrel fish there actually, so they're usually active in the night, and we haven't seen any on the dives before during the daytime, so they're usually hiding, but now you can see a few.
In terms of the big animals, do they come out at night often as well? The sharks, the manta rays, etc.
Yeah, they do. Particularly certain sharks. The nurse sharks, if you remember the last one, most of them were just resting in the nighttime. In the daytime, and at night they're more active and feeding. Unfortunately, today we're at Ellaidhoo, but Alimata is where most of the nurse sharks are. But Ellaidhoo is really a fun night dive because you get a lot of small critters, as we call it. For macro photography, it's a nice place on a night dive. There's a lionfish there in the crevice. Now these also feed at night. You can see them kind of getting close to get some footage.
Looking through the messages coming in from Peter De Beer, Stefan Kramer. There's a lot of love for night dives. I just realized that a lot of people seem to love night dives.
Yeah, I think a lot of divers are fascinated with this. Personally, I enjoy day dives more, but I do really enjoy night dives as a photographer, especially for macro photography. It's really nice because you're not distracted as much with the things around you. You kind of look for small things and you focus on those things, and what you enjoy with night dives is you start appreciating the small things a lot more, because on the reef we're always looking for these big animals, but usually there's a lot of small invertebrates, small fish, lots of behavior that we don't always pay attention to. On night dives you can focus a little bit more about that. You can, if you're a photographer, try to get some nice close-up shots of those as well.
As you can see, Aakash kind of preparing himself.
It's a porcupine fish. As you can see, I mean, they're quite relaxed. They're moving around. They're doing, usually the nocturnally active animals are not as scared of the lights. It's the daytime animals because they're basically resting and they're very, very wary of predators at this time.
It's interesting comment coming in from the reef lovers. They say the sharks and jackfish hunt in your torchlight. They love divers in night dives.
Yeah, giant trevallies can actually be fun and intimidating on night dives sometimes. They actually use your light to detect prey. So when you're pointing at a small fish, usually they'll charge down your torch and attack fish. But then sometimes you have these moments where they kind of come straight at you down their torch beam as well. They're not attacking you, but it's quite intimidating when a large giant trevally comes charging down.
Got it. This is the Divestream with Cinnamon in association with Visit Maldives.
Show your primary light, but we also have a backup light, and the way you have to signal, because underwater on regular dives you can't speak, so you use hand signals, which you have to find a way to make visible to people. So how you kind of plan your dive and having those backup instrumentation, those things are there, and a few things that you have to learn about. But so not just as you start diving, but you don't have to be super experienced to do it either.
Of fish?
Yeah, so the small fish are basically feeding on the plankton. Usually you tend to find more kind of small planktonic animals in the water at night. What happens is these things that are in deeper water, especially in a place like Maldives where you have these steep drop-offs or walls, you get what's called upwelling, and these animals do like a migration at night. Some of the planktonic animals actually migrate during the night up towards the surface, and then they also go down during the daytime. And following this, you usually find things like squid. There's some lobsters, one of the common things to see on a night dive. So these animals, the planktonic animals come up there. Usually you get things like squid following them, which is why squid fishing in many parts of the world happens more at night, because the squid are coming near the surface. So there's a lot more small animals in the water, and there are other animals feeding on them.
So because you presume that they are also aware that the predators are not in and around?
Yeah, it is generally safer for them. You
Right.
have a lot more animals feeding and active at night, and these animals have learned to use the cycles, and they're attracted by light and changes in light.
This is Divestream with Cinnamon in association with Visit Maldives, the sunny side of life. We are on Divestream 6 of 6, the very final one. We are coming to you live from the beautiful house reef of Ellaidhoo Maldives by Cinnamon. Our first night dive, we thought no better way to end this fantastic series than with something rather special. Basically in the waters is Aakash Malhotra, aka Wander with Sky. He is on scuba today, taking on some of the depths of the reef.
Yeah, I think scuba is a lot more practical to do night dives. It's more difficult to orient yourself, so that's one of the challenges you have with a night dive, your own orientation, keeping track of where you are and which part of the reef you are and directions. You don't have the same visual references that you have during daytime, and if you have to constantly go up and down on free diving, then you put an added layer of challenges.
Yes.
So there you can see one of the crinoids or feather stars. Now we saw these on the wreck a few days ago. They were kind of more closed in. So these now have kind of put out their arms, and they're feeding in the water. So sometimes they're also called basket stars, because you can see now that they're kind of opened up like a basket. When we saw it on the wreck during the day, they were not extending their arms out like that. That's how they are during the daytime. But now it's actually feeding at night.
The fairly blue hue that you see, is it straight off the halogen lighting that comes off the boats, or
Here from the surface.
Yeah.
So here it could be partly from the resort lights as well. So when you're diving near the jetty, there's
Right,
some ambient light coming from the resort and the jetty. It's actually fun in some places where they actually have quite bright lighting. You can kind of play with your lights and knock your lights torch off for a few seconds and kind of observe marine life using the ambient light.
Yeah. Beautiful colors of them.
Yeah, it's you just have to focus a lot more to look for animals, but that's part of the challenge and the fun of it as well. So you kind of usually experienced night divers and photographers will set themselves a challenge of looking for a specific animal, and will spend an hour underwater, scouring the reef looking for one animal. Some grouper, one of the coral groupers. So those are diurnal or daytime animals, so they're usually just hanging around.
It makes sense because, like you mentioned at the beginning, because following the 5 streams that we've done thus far, obviously we saw a whole bunch of these beautiful fish, mostly in schools. So seeing them individually is quite different to what we saw in the past few streams.
Yeah, and see, you haven't seen any of the big schools of the snappers now, but they are around on this reef. They're just probably moving around feeding. It's basically sleeping there. What's interesting is parrotfish are really cool when they go to sleep at night. They actually secrete a mucus membrane around their body. So it's like not necessarily saliva, but they can secrete mucus from the body, which they enclose the body, because a lot of nighttime predators like moray eels and stuff hunt using smell, because they don't have the benefit of a torch to hunt. They hunt using smell, so the mucus basically protects them and prevents the predator from smelling them.
Right. What's this we see here?
That's a porcupine fish. So we saw a few, I think, in the early days. again, you can see the big eyes. Another thing to note is that a lot of animals that are actually active at night tend to have large eyes because getting more light as possible. So there are also wrasses that you get. It's another group of fish that they bury in the sand at night, again to avoid detection by predators. Unless you're a stingray, when you can use electromagnetic signals to pick it up, but animals hunting with smell are not going to smell you when you're buried under the sand. So they use all these kind of defense strategies when they're sleeping at night.
Light hits the reef directly in the night. The colors are much more vivid than what we've kind of seen in the daytime.
Yeah, definitely brings out a lot more, because even with a small light you get a lot of color. Because actually when we were diving earlier, we were not using artificial light. They were filming using ambient light.
Yes.
So it goes back to what I was trying to say earlier, was that in water, water absorbs the red wavelengths and the orange wavelengths through the water column. So when you go deeper, you don't see many colors. Everything has kind of bluish hue. But if you use a light, so as a photographer, like if I would use a strobe or a light, then you bring out colors. People will look at the pictures and think the reef is really colorful. It is. It actually is colorful. But if you're diving without a light, you won't see those colors. Now he's actually using artificial light. You get the same colors if you go in the daytime with a light, but they were not using lights on the other days. So which is why actually a lot of fish use red as a camouflage color when they're deeper. So like the squirrel fish are actually red, and you think it's very bright and easy to spot, but it's not. When you go deeper into the water, you don't see the red color.
And on the rusty fish, as you can see them.
Yeah, more triggerfish. There they are. I was mentioned this, I think, on the first day. They have their head stuck into a hole and their tail kind of sticking out. We always laugh about ostriches sticking their head in the sand. So triggerfish like to stick their head in the reef and leave their behinds exposed. One of the big clams.
This is Divestream with Cinnamon in association with Visit Maldives, the sunny side of life. We're on the very final Divestream 6 of 6, coming to you from the beautiful Ellaidhoo Maldives by Cinnamon. We are at the house reef, just a couple of meters away from your rooms. And if you are in the resort or you plan to be in the resort, feel free to head by the dive center by Dive and Sail. They'll be happy to assist you with all your diving needs, whether it be day or night. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Aakash after these. Aakash at the beautiful house reef of Ellaidhoo Maldives by Cinnamon. This is Divestream with Cinnamon in association with Visit Maldives, the sunny side of life. As always, with me in the studio, Nishan Pereira, absolute marine wildlife expert. If you have any questions, send them in on our Facebook Live and YouTube Live comments. We'll be happy to take them on. What are we seeing here, Nishan?
So this is a flute mouth, obviously named because of its long mouth. These guys hunt small fish and things in the water column. They have kind of ability to kind of suck them in.
Right.
So that's probably what it's doing, looking for prey. They're actually quite common on reefs. During the daytime, you'll find them in very shallow water. When you're snorkeling at night, they'll kind of move into deeper areas looking for prey as well. So with the light, you'll also see a lot of the kind of the plankton, the small particles in the water. In photography or videography terms, we refer to as backscatter. So what's basically happening is the light is kind of hitting those particles in the water and reflecting back. It's in the daytime you don't see it, it's there, but you don't. So it's not only plankton but also small sand particles that get disturbed from the sediment in the water column. So this is something that's always a challenge for photographers and videographers when you're using artificial light. So on a night time you're always using artificial light because you have to use a torch. But even during daytime, if you're using lights or if you're doing strobe flash photography, you have these challenges that you have to overcome.
And we're just talking about how tough it is to capture footage in the night because you are basically holding a torch on one hand, the camera on the other hand, while you're trying to balance while scuba. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's quite a challenge. I mean, photography and videography underwater is a lot more challenging than on land because not only do you have to focus on getting that shot, you have to think about your buoyancy, or keeping yourself kind of stable in the water. If you're conscious about the environment, you don't want to damage the corals. So that's a greenoid feather star. I think it's got some food, so it's kind of closing in on itself. So this is something they'll do. They'll have their tentacles out or their hands, arms out. They'll capture food and they'll take it to the center of their body where they have their mouths and their stomachs. So then they digest it. So you're trying to avoid, touching the reef and kicking the corals. You're trying to have buoyancy. You're trying to focus on your shot. And the night you have to have this torch that you're trying to spot animals with. It's quite a challenge. As you can see, the footage is not like when you're doing in the daytime, but you have to bear in mind that the person bringing it to you is dealing with a lot of challenges.
Question coming in from Chris Pyrie.
So there's that's the parrotfish sleeping there.
Right.
So what I mentioned earlier. So now you can see it's very still, it's not moving, it's kind of in a dazed state, though the eyes are open, because fish don't really close their eyes when they sleep, but they're kind of in a trance state. It's completely oblivious to your presence. I don't advise you touching it, but if you reached out and touched it, it would just not move, it'd be just there. But sorry, you can put the question.
We're getting a question coming from Chris Pyrie. I don't know if you have an answer, but do you know roughly how deep the divers would be at this point?
Difficult to say. I would think they're maybe at about 10 to 15 meters, probably no more. Usually people tend not to dive too deep on night dives, and there's plenty to see in these areas. This is certainly not in the very shallow part of the reef. Just by looking at the reef structure, and I have personally dived at this reef, so I know that this is not in the shallowest part where you normally snorkel or finish your dive on. This is probably a little off the edge along the reef slope, so maybe around 10 meters, but can't be sure, to be honest.
Kim Cha says, "Oh, I miss the ocean and the Maldives." Well, that's why we're doing this for you. You can enjoy it from the comfort of your home. See it now, experience it later. This is Divestream with Cinnamon in association with Visit Maldives, the sunny side of life. Coming to you from the beautiful house reef of Ellaidhoo Maldives by Cinnamon. It's stream number 6 of 6. Unfortunately, the very final one, and we hope you've enjoyed the journey thus far. But given the feedback, given the fantastic footage, I'm sure we'll be doing it again. Starfish there, is it?
Yep, it's big starfish. It's also usually feeding. starfish actually have an interesting way of feeding, that they can actually extrude their stomach outside and digest the animal. So they don't have to actually ingest the animal. So again, another parrotfish sleeping there. You can see it's just completely locked in there, and it's fast asleep. And we think it's very visible, but again, nighttime, most predators are using smell as their primary sense, and they won't smell the parrotfish. More feather stars or basket stars. So you're seeing a lot more feather stars, a lot more sea stars or starfish today on this dive than we saw on the daytime dives, because all these animals are more active now. Dive that day, we saw a few lobsters on the first day. So this reef does have lobsters. As you can see along this steep wall, there are a lot of walls and crevices, which is perfect habitat for lobsters.
Quite close to the bend, in fact.
It's not the puffer fish on the bottom there. Yeah, they're kind of gone. Flat part of the reef there. Puffers are really funny fish. Look at the body shape. So these guys actually are, again, their defense mechanism. The reason they're called puffers is if you threaten them or if they are alarmed, they basically swallow a lot of water and become like a ball. So they puff up. If you take them out of the water, they swallow air and become like a ball. They're also very toxic or poisonous. So they have, some of their internal organs are very poisonous if you ingest it. So you should never eat a puffer fish. So that's kind of another defense mechanism. A lot of other animals know that they're poisonous, so they're actual, scientifically they're called, their genus is, family is Tetradontidae, or tetradon is the poison, the technical name for that type of poison. A lot of small fish kind of congregate, so now they're out at night because kind of charge through this.
They seem very, very still though, until you get very close to them.
Yeah. They're very small fish. You don't really notice the scale on this in the video, but again, lots of feather stars now. We never saw so many on the daytime, but they're all out. They're moving into prominent places in the reef. They're all out feeding. Now what you see when they shine their light on, so a lot of the instruments the divers use actually they don't illuminate, there's no light on them, but if you shine your torch on them, then they kind of light up for you. Yeah. So the other thing that happens is when you move or turn the camera, because there is not enough light, you go into these dark spaces, you think they're not filming, but in the daytime you don't notice as much because you have this wide field of vision and a depth of field, so you actually always have something in sight. So here when he moves the camera, you don't see anything until he focuses on another subject, but that's just the challenge of night diving. The same footage in the daytime would look completely different. So there are some black corals. So it's one of the species of black corals. Black corals are actually not black in color, as you will notice. Funnily, some of these corals tend to feed during daytime. If it's cloudy or overcast or if the visibility is a bit poor and it gets darker, their senses get tricked into doing the typical cloudy feeding. There's a reef shark. That's a white-tip reef shark. That's out on a hunt. That's a nocturnal predator.
Something following it as well.
Yep.
Best shot to get the footage.
I think the shark was too quick for him. They do move quite fast, especially when they're active on the reef hunting. There's a couple of trevally hanging around with it as well. So sometimes you'll also have cooperative group hunting. We saw earlier of the goldfish kind of digging up the sand and a wrasse following it in the day dives. There's another shark there. It might have been grey reef.
What do you look for in sharks?
So white-tip reef sharks basically are looking mostly for fish. They will take things like lobsters. So fish that are sleeping in like those triggerfish and other things that are hiding under ledges, they will pick it up. So if you look at the white-tip reef sharks, they have this very long slit in their body. And they're really able to twist their body a lot and get themselves into very tight spaces to pick out fish. So that's the line for the mooring at the jetty. I think the divers are using that as a point of reference to tell them where they are on the reef. Beth was using it the other day doing free diving. It's always good to have some kind of reference. It always tells you which part of the reef you're in. There was a trevally moving around there as well. So they'll do group hunting as well like this. So where one animal will chase it, there's a trevally there. And then sometimes another one benefits when the animal tries to exit from another place. Got a little bit deeper on the reef. Just looking at the marine life, there's a bit more soft corals, a few sea fans, some black corals. So usually you find these in deep water.
Dear.
There's a big trevally. Now, you were talking about them using your light for hunting.
Yeah, there.
So exactly, that's what you see. They kind of come straight at you as well. Quite intimidating if you're in the water, but they're not really attacking you. They're looking for the smaller fish. There they do. They come straight up to you and kind of bank at the last moment.
They're absolutely stunning in the direct light.
Yeah, they're very powerful, very muscular fish, very fast, and very agile. It's not just the fact that they're fast. They're able to make very sharp turns. So you see them come straight at you, and just at the last moment, kind of one flick of the tail, and they'll turn. So you see a lot more like soft coral sea fans. So that's usually found a little bit deeper or under like ledges where you have less sunlight.
Right.
During the daytime, of course. So whip corals, soft corals. The trevallies are quite active here.
Yeah. And they are definitely using the lights, as we can see.
I think in places where, there are popular dive sites, or in a place like this where you have guests diving, I'm sure at most days you have people diving, these animals become habituated to use divers. So we talked about cooperative hunting of animals working together. So they kind of look at humans as a partner in their hunt as well. So they see an advantage, this, and they'll pounce on it. They're very opportunistic. I think a lot of people don't think of fish in that sense because we don't interact with them in the marine environment. But I can tell you, as someone who studies reef fish and their behavior, they have very, very interesting behavior. They have what we call cognitive ability, or the ability to learn new things as well. It's a big snapper there on the ledge. There are a few caves and ledges here. Seems to be a lot more action.
This is Divestream with Cinnamon in association with Visit Maldives, the sunny side of life. We are currently on the final Divestream, episode 6 of 6, with Aakash Malhotra aka One with Sky, and we are doing a very special night dive at the beautiful house reef of Ellaidhoo Maldives by Cinnamon. There's quite a bit of activity in this particular area.
Yeah, the trevallies seem to be really active here. Obviously onto something that we can't really see, but they will use the divers' lights for hunting. There's a couple of big snappers there as well. And the trevallies are definitely in kind of a hunting mode. You can see them quite, I wouldn't use the word agitated, but quite excited. They're not just cruising around. Their behavior, the way they're swimming, they're actually actively looking for things.
And for hunting, do the trevallies primarily depend on the on sight, or?
Yeah, trevallies are primarily driven visually. They don't use smell in the same way that say moray eels or white tip reef sharks do. So this is why they actually
the lights come in their favor for sure.
So things like moray eels, they will just go about their business when divers are there or not. Trevallies usually tend to hunt a lot more in the daytime.
Right.
But in places like this where they have an opportunity, they're just taking the chance.
If you have any questions or comments, do drop them in on our chat box, whether it's Facebook Live or YouTube Live. We'll be happy to take them on. With me in studio is Nishant Pereira.
Hoping we see a couple more of the white tip reef sharks that we saw earlier. They're always really nice to see hunting, especially if they're kind of chasing things into holes, but difficult to spot as well.
How often is it sighted where they actually succeed in a hunt and they've actually...
Especially things like the trevallies, or even particularly the white tip reef sharks, when they do have a successful hunt, what you find is they'll try to, gang up on the animal that's successful. So when one animal catches a fish, all the others will try to steal the prey, so it ends up tearing this fish into pieces, so everyone just gets a small bite out of it. So the difference here is that because the trevallies are using the divers' lights to help them, they are actually hanging around the divers. When we saw the white tip reef sharks, they use smell a lot more. I mean, they're primarily adapted to hunt using smell at night.
Right.
So they're not really hanging around near the divers. You saw one or two sharks and they kind of cruised off.
Yes.
But whereas the trevallies, they're actually following the diver. They're kind of, once they stick to you, they're kind of with you right through the dive. I think they've come back to the mooring line. Perhaps they're just descending to the surface now.
This has been Divestream with Cinnamon in association with Visit Maldives, the sunny side of life. We are on Divestream 6 of 6, coming to you from the beautiful house reef at Ellaidhoo Maldives by Cinnamon. It's been quite the journey the past 6 dive streams, or just over a week or so. We've been absolutely all across Maldives, aided by the lovely, stunning locations, by some of the best dive sites all over Maldives, exactly where Cinnamon resorts are. Whether it be Cinnamon Velifushi, whether it be Don Valley, whether it be Hakurahura, or right here at Ellaidhoo. I feel like it's a lovely full circle. We started off in Ellaidhoo and now we're back here again to end things off.
Yeah, I think what was nice is not only were there different resorts, they were in different atolls in the Maldives.
Yeah,
so
sure.
the each atoll in the Maldives, while there's a lot of similarities, there are subtle differences in the marine life and the conditions as well. So we got to experience kind of different conditions, very different dive sites. The house reef, easy dive, easy access, not a challenging dive. It's a nice relaxed dive for lots of reef fish and the critter action. We saw the mantas and the cleaning stations, the nurse sharks. The shipwreck, so it's been a nice mix. I think Hakuratila we saw one day, which is one of the very well-known marine protected areas in the Maldives, a very popular dive site, one of the top tilas. So it's been a nice
Yes, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you, Nishan, and not to forget today Chitral or Vimukti are not in studio, but they have been absolutely fantastic as well. And how can we not thank our fantastic content creators, Aakash Malhotra aka Wonder with Sky, and Beth Neal and Miles Cloutier have been absolutely fantastic, allowing hundreds of people around the world to kind of experience dive while they're stuck at home. Till the next time, stay safe and take care.